All right. So yeah, this app is it's a scripting app, and it's going to be of the most interest to people who maybe have a little background in AppleScript. It is technically, I consider it easier to do than AppleScript, so you don't need a lot of knowledge. But it's also flexible enough that if you have a lot of knowledge, you can make use of all of it. I edited down the short intro I did for Macstock this year, and I'm going to show that first. It'll give you a good overview and give you a good feel for what it does. And then I'll stop. Ask you if you have any immediate questions, I'll answer them. And then I went through and basically demonstrated all of the bunches, which you'll understand what a bunch is in a second, but all of the bunches I use every day to kind of show you what it can do. All of the demos are done. I'm editing in Sublime Text. You can edit in anything from text edit to VS Code to Sublime Text, whatever works. If you're using a fancier editor like Sublime or VS Code, there are packages available that do syntax highlighting and auto completion to make life easier. But like I said, you can just load it up in TextEdit and you can make amazing things happen. So I'm going to share my screen and make sure that audio comes through. If it doesn't, let me know.
Will do.
Got it.
This year I'm talking about an app I made called Bunch. You may have heard it mentioned by the likes of Rosemary Orchard, David Sparks, or Merlin Mann, but I'm betting some of you who did hear about it didn't get how it could be useful to you. So for everyone who's never heard about it before, and for those who haven't found a compelling reason to try it yet, I'll do my best to convince you. Bunch is a free app, and I stand to gain nothing by getting you into it, so rest assured that I'm doing this in what I believe to be your best interest. Anyway, Bunch has been my latest labor of love and a bit of an obsession in my free time. It's an app I first published in 2019. Despite having sunk way too much time into it over the last year, I've kept it donationware. It's free to use and you can contribute if you like it. I have a day job now that pays well, and I enjoy writing Bunch enough that I can justify giving it away for free for the time being. You can get your hands on Bunch at bunchapp.co. You'll also find all of the documentation there. It's very complete. Some might say overly complete. I, on the other hand, am quite proud of all that writing. The tools I used to build this site from a pile of markdown files is a topic for another talk. So, what is Bunch? Bunch is a tool for plain text automation, meaning you write a list of things you want done in plain text and Bunch does them. It's like scripting, but the syntax is simpler and it makes a lot of complex tasks as easy as typing a couple of words. To launch an app, you type the name of the app. To quit an app, you just add an exclamation point before it. It's simple. In most cases, it's far simpler than Apple scripting the same solution, and it can do things that even AppleScript can't. Bunch actually started as an Apple script. I just wanted to launch a bunch of apps at once, and yes, that's where the name came from. Then I wanted it to do more stuff, and I wanted to be able to replicate the result for different groups of apps, and I wanted it to be simpler to write and maintain, so I built Bunch. Bunch lives in your menu bar. Its menu lists all of your available bunches, which is what the script files are called, and you can click them to turn them on and off. And this is a Brett Terpstra creation, so you can be sure it's fully keyboard friendly. In this presentation, I'm going to show you just one bunch. It should give you an idea what Bunch is capable of and maybe inspire you to create your own automations. Or maybe it will inspire you to write your own automation app, which is an endeavor I fully support. There's no such thing as too many options when it comes to automation. While Bunch can be used in a lot of different ways, my main focus in creating it was context switching. A context is everything your Mac needs to perform a specific task. Some apps need to be running, some apps should not be running, the system settings need to work for the type of task you're performing, and everything from your wallpaper to the music that's playing should be just right for the task. And you should be able to set all of that up with one click, giving you a consistent and predictable environment, and then switch to a different context with one more click. And when you're done, it should put everything back the way it was. That's what Bunch aims to do. So, possibly confusingly, Bunch is the name of the app, but it's also the name of the text files that create a context. A bunch, singular, is just a text file with the extension .bunch. It defines all of the apps, commands, and scripts that go into a given context. You can have as many bunches as you want, and they can be very simple, just launching a few apps, or complex creations that launch apps, quit others, execute built-in commands, run custom scripts, use variables and conditional logic, and even include interactivity with pop-up selections and dialogues. In the end though, they're just text files, and I'll show you one in a sec. All of the bunches you create show up in the bunch menu in your menu bar. Once you have a lot of bunches, there are ways to easily sort them into submenus or even organize them with tags, because as you may or may not know, I have a thing for tags, but we'll keep it simple for now. Before we get started, let's make sure we have some preferences set. You open Preferences from the Bunch menu. Bunch is fully keyboard navigable. If you define a global shortcut key, you can pop the Bunch menu open using just the keyboard. By default, all of your bunches are assigned numeric shortcuts. We'll get to customizing those in a minute. If you have toggle bunches enabled, bunches can both open and close and can perform different tasks in either direction. Apps that were launched when a bunch opened are automatically quit when the bunch closes. Most bunch commands, such as do not disturb or wallpaper changes, are reversed automatically. You can also enable single bunch mode, which will automatically close the current bunch when you open another one, performing all of the necessary tasks to close one and open the other. It will even avoid quitting apps or reversing commands if the new bunch is just going to open them again anyway. It's pretty smart like that. I'm going to demonstrate a simplified version of the bunch I use when I record podcasts. It's going to disable notifications, launch the apps and websites I need, set up my audio devices, and even pause bandwidth-heavy apps so my network connection stays snappy. So, first we create a new text file in our bunch folder. You can get to your bunch folder easily from the preference pane. Just click Reveal next to the bunch folder selector. A bunch is any file in this folder that has the extension bunch. So we'll create a new file in our text editor and save it as podcast.bunch in our bunch folder. For this demo, I'm editing in Sublime Text, but you can edit a bunch in any text editor, including TextEdit in plain text mode. There are bunch packages available for Sublime, TextMate, and VS Code to make editing even easier. You can see that this bunch we've created automatically shows up in the menu. It won't do anything yet, but the menu will update every time we make a change. At the top of a bunch, you can add what bunch refers to as front matter, which is just a block of text at the top of the file delimited by 3 dashes on lines before and after. It contains key value pairs separated by colons. If you're familiar with YAML, it's very similar, but only allows single line string values. There are quite a few built-in front matter keys that you can use to affect a bunch's behavior and functionality, including manually ordering the menu and scheduling a bunch to open or close at specific times or on specific days. For this bunch, we're just going to use the two most common keys, title and shortcut. The title key defines what will be displayed in the bunch menu. It can include emoji to make your menu even prettier if you want. And now the menu will show our display title instead of the file name. And we'll add a shortcut key which lets us assign a keyboard shortcut for launching the bunch. If you set a global keyboard shortcut in bunch preferences, the shortcut means you can toggle the bunch with 2 keystrokes, one to open the bunch menu and one to select this bunch. Front matter is all optional, but it can do a lot of cool stuff. To launch an app in Bunch, you just put the name of the app on a line. You can add some special syntax to do things like launch hidden, hide other apps, or force it to the foreground, but in its simplest form, writing the name of an app launches it when Bunch opens and quits it when the bunch closes. I communicate with Christina, my overtired co-host, via messages, and with listeners using Discord, so I'll want those apps running in this context. All of my other communication apps like Tweetbot and Slack should be quit. On my system, all of those communication apps are launched in another bunch called comms, so I can quit them all at once by closing the comms bunch using an !comms.bunch. If an app that would be quit by this also exists in the bunch that's opening, it's left running, So by adding messages and Discord to this bunch, those apps will stay open when all of the other comms apps quit. Commands are specified by parentheses containing the command and any options. Bunch responds to quite a few commands, as you can see here. Dark mode toggle, do not disturb, hiding and showing the dock, hiding and showing the desktop icons, and a bunch more. Bunch can even create single site browsers with myriad display options using the display command. But we'll focus on just a couple commands for this bunch. While I'm podcasting, I don't want any notifications, so I'll add a command to enable do not disturb. Most of the commands accept natural variations of the syntax. For example, to hide the dock, you can use dock hide or hide dock. For this command, you can type do not disturb, but it can be shortened to just DND on. When a bunch closes, most commands are automatically reversed, so I don't have to tell bunch to disable do not disturb later. It will happen automatically when the bunch closes. Bunch can change audio devices and set volumes using the audio command. When specifying a device, you only need to write out enough of the name for it to be unique in that list of devices, and Bunch will use the first match. I want my speakers muted while I'm recording, so I'll set the audio output to my Mac Mini speakers and then mute them. Just specifying Mini is enough to match that device. I want the input device to be set to my Scarlett Solo. I have a loopback device that makes my XLR interface mutable, so I'll select that. I'll need to keep show notes while I record, so I'll open NV Ultra. Yes, NV Ultra is still in beta, but if you're not already on the list, just email me and I'll add you. It's really good, and I'd hate for anyone to miss out due to our extended development schedule. In a more complex version of this bunch, I have it ask me which show I'm recording and what the episode number is, then create a new note automatically using the NV Ultra URL handler. For this demo, I'll just have it make sure that NV Ultra is running and open my podcasting notebook, ready for me to create a new note myself. Before we start opening new apps, let's hide everything else. You can do this just by putting @ on a line by itself. Normally, when you launch an app in a bunch, it will be quit when you close the bunch. I want NV Ultra open pretty much all the time, so I can add a % symbol before the app to tell Bunch to launch it if needed, but ignore it when closing. You can tell an app what files to open by adding lines right beneath it, starting with dashes, like a markdown list. These are called file lines. You can use XX on a file line to close all open windows before opening new ones. In this case, I'm actually going to send an NV Ultra URL to use its built-in URL handler to open my podcasting notebook. Obviously, I'm going to need my recording apps. I record with Skype and Audio Hijack, so I can just add those on their own lines with no % sign or anything. When I close this bunch, I want those apps to quit. I use the fabulous Backbeat Media for ad sales, so before each episode I need to check their ad management system to see what sponsors I have for the episode. I can tell Bunch to open a specific URL just by adding it on a line as if it were an app. If you run multiple browsers, you can also tell Bunch which browser to open the URL in with a prefix. Let's open the ad manager in Firefox. I also want to quit bandwidth hogging apps like Backblaze and Dropbox to make sure they don't cause hiccups in my Skype connection. Normally you can just quit apps by putting an exclamation point in front of them, but Dropbox is weird about that and Backblaze doesn't have an app that you can quit, so we have to use scripting. Bunch can run Apple scripts, shell scripts, and automator workflows. You just start a line with the appropriate character for the type of script and then give it a command or a path to a script file. To run a shell script, you start the line with a $sign. First, we'll use the Unix command kill all to terminate Dropbox. We're redirecting any output from the command to dev null so any errors there won't trip up the bunch. Bunch is good about notifying you of errors when running a script, but in cases like this, it's a pretty brute force solution and you don't really need to know how it turned out. Just kill them all. Backblaze has a command line tool called bztransmit that can be used to pause and resume backups. It's much more elegant than a kill signal. We also want to resume both of these apps when we're done podcasting, so we use an exclamation point prefix. This runs the script or command when the bunch closes instead of when it opens. To resume Backblaze when we close the bunch, we use bztransmit complete sync. The Dropbox app can just be launched to restart it. In the case of apps, using a single exclamation point tells Bunch to quit the app, but using a double exclamation point tells Bunch to launch the app when the bunch is closing. I call that a double negative. It got a little confusing as the syntax evolved, where an exclamation point would quit an app and 2 would launch it on close, but you only need 1 to run a script on close. To be fair, the double negative also works when running scripts and commands on close. I really should have just shown it that way, but it's too late. I already typed it. But the syntax is forgiving enough that you can get close enough and get the right results. Like I said, it's pretty smart. So one more detail. Audio Hijack is entirely unscriptable, and it can't even open files to load a specific session. I love the app, and Rogue Amoeba makes amazing stuff, but geez. Fortunately, Bunch makes simple work of sending keystrokes to apps, so I can use Audio Hijack's keyboard shortcuts to open the Sessions menu, select my podcast session, and then close the Sessions window. On a file line, you can surround a series of keystrokes with curly brackets to interpret them as keyboard shortcuts. Bunch understands all kinds of formatting for specifying modifier keys and keystrokes, but we're going to use the very simple syntax that Mac key bindings use. In this case, the @ symbol represents command, which is all we need for these. We already launched Audio Hijack earlier, but we want to target it again for sending the keystroke so it gets another line. That will send command 2 and command 1, which will make sure the window is open and then focus the Sessions tab. Then we send the right arrow key 12 times and hit Command O. That will select the podcast session and open it. Obviously, this is very specific to my setup, where the podcast session is the 12th one in my list, but it's easy to customize. Then we hit Command 0 to refocus the Sessions window and Command W to close it, leaving our podcast session as the only open window. By the way, Bunch can also type out strings for you in a given app, so you can do things like automate an email or text message or open a terminal and type a command, but we don't need that for this Bunch. One thing Bunch doesn't do is handle window positioning. At least for Windows, it doesn't create itself. It's just too complex a task for an app like Bunch to deal with well. However, apps like Moom do an excellent job of filling in this missing piece, and Moom is scriptable, so it's easy to integrate with Bunch. In Moom, I can create a snapshot which places windows from multiple apps all at once, and I can trigger it with a single AppleScript command. I'm going to do this in what's called the embedded snippet. This is intermediate level Bunch magic, so I'm not going to go into too many details, but I'll explain a little. The syntax with the double angle bracket and the hash tells Bunch to pull in a snippet from the bottom of the bunch, titled Position Windows. The ~4 at the end means to wait 4 seconds before running the contents of that snippet. We add the snippet after 3 underscores, which is what signifies an embedded snippet, meaning it doesn't need an external file. The first line you see after the underscores is the fragment name, letting Bunch know where to find the Position Windows snippet. Fragments are basically sections in one file or embedded snippet, and Bunch can target just that section in the larger snippet. A line starting with an asterisk gets executed as AppleScript, which we'll use to invoke a Moom snapshot. Adding a tab before the snippet call makes Bunch wait until all apps in the bunch have shown at least one window. So we're waiting for windows and then delaying an additional 4 seconds before we try to position them. Our new bunch is already in the menu and we can test it just by selecting it from the menu. I could, of course, just hit my Bunch keyboard shortcut and hit R, but I'll do it the hard way just for you. Social apps quit except for the ones I need. My recording apps launch. Dropbox and Backblaze are paused, Do Not Disturb is enabled, my audio devices are set up, and my show notes and ad reads are loaded up, ready to podcast. When I'm done, I just click the podcast bunch again and Do Not Disturb is turned off, my social apps relaunch, and Dropbox and Backblaze are resumed. So that's a demonstration of Bunch in action. Like I said at the top, this one is a bit simplified. A bunch can be even simpler than this, but it can also get more complex. The version of the podcasting bunch I use in reality goes a bit further with interactivity and scripting. For example, it asks which podcast I'm recording, and if I tell it I'm recording overtired instead of systematic, it launches Quip, which I use to share notes with my co-host Christina, but I don't need for other podcasts. Bunch integrates with a ton of other apps like Keyboard Maestro and Better Touch Tool to extend its capabilities. Bunch commands can do a lot, including things like disabling your screensaver, toggling dark mode, hiding your dock, and changing your wallpaper, which, by the way, are some great tools for a screencasting bunch. But add on the power of other great Mac automation tools, plus full support for any kind of scripts, and you can do just about anything. You can also start using snippets to create reusable fragments. Snippets also open up possibilities like making an entire section of a bunch optional with continue cancel dialog, adding delayed bunches, and doing things like running entire sections on close instead of when opening the bunch. Bunch can create drop-down and multiple choice dialogues as well as ask for text input. You can also assign and use variables. Variables can get their values from front matter, script results, dialogue responses, and more, and then you can use them to customize what actions happen. You can even use if-else statements to do different things based on variable values. There's also a URL handler and an AppleScript library for incorporating Bunch into other applications. There are extensions available for LaunchBar and Alfred. The Alfred integration is actually the work of Jay Miller, a MacStock alum, who also did an episode of Automators where he talked a bit about Bunch. He's basically my PR firm on this project. An unpaid PR firm, so thanks, Jay. There's even a command line tool for doing everything from terminal, and the docs include info on integrating Bunch with many other apps and tools, from your Stream Deck to your home automation system.
So that's a rapid fire look at some of Bunch's capabilities. Now I will turn it back over to myself to look in depth at a few more of Bunch's features. Thanks, Brett. That was really exciting. Okay, so I'll pause here if anyone has any burning questions. Most of the stuff I talked about in there, the stuff I said, I'll get to that in a second. I'm about to get to in the next part. But does anyone want to? Did I confuse anyone too badly already?
Oh, I'll jump in on that. I'll not answer that question, but I do have a question. All right, so I see all of the things that Bunch can do. And in the chat, you mentioned that you're using OBS.
Yeah.
And I know with OBS, like you can, because you're doing your podcast or whatever, you can do like layers that allow you to show different things in different portions of your screen. Is it possible that I could use Bunch to pop up something, maybe a PNG on my screen without having to use those other programs?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, I'm pretty sure I covered that in the next part, but Bunch has a display command, and you can give it an HTML file or a website, and it'll create a single site browser. If you give it an image, it'll float an image on your screen, and you can control whether there's like a background to the window. You can control what level it floats at, like desktop, normal, or floating. So it can't be covered by other apps. Yeah,
Okay.
it's pretty complex with that.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Any other questions for Brett at this moment? Okay, it's all yours then, Brett.
All right. Let's do part 2. I lost my window. 1 second. There we go. All right, so I'm just gonna show you a few of my kind of some bunches I actually use and some that I use for testing, just to show what Bunch can do. And hopefully that gives you a good idea of like what you'd want to do with it. And seriously, if it sounds like it can do something, it probably can, and you can ask me anytime and I'll help you write a bunch. So I've got my Bunch folder It's in Dropbox because I sync it with multiple machines, and Bunch has features that let you tell it only execute certain things on certain machines. I'll show you real quick. In the preferences, there's a copy UUID button, and when you click that, it puts in your clipboard a UUID, which is a unique identifier for your computer, and then you can do something like schedule if, and then give it that UUID, and then if the Bunch runs any scheduling, like runs on a regular basis, it would only schedule it if it's on this machine and not any others that it syncs to. We'll probably see that again as we go through these, but first up is front matter. We saw a little bit of that before, but you've got your title, which is how the Bunch will appear in the menu. And you can see I like to use emoji in the title. You can also do a title prefix and put the emoji in that. See the change. See, it turns green when it detects a change in the directory. And now it's got the emoji. And the nice thing about the title prefix is when you have subfolders and you have tags, you can apply front matter to everything in that folder or everything that has that tag. And then in a front matter file for that, you just put a title prefix in, and then everything related gets the same icon in your menu, which is handy depending on your organization methods. The shortcut is the keyboard shortcut that you use to trigger it. So I have a hotkey that lets me open it with one click, and then I can just tap any of these shortcuts. And shortcuts can be upper or lowercase letters. If you use capital O, then you have to hit Shift O to trigger it. You can also use modifiers. Et is command, tilde is option, caret Shift 6 is control, and $ is shift. So you can create any keyboard combination you want with those. Sequence is whether the Bunch executes everything all at once or whether it does it sequentially. The full keyword is sequential, but you can just type sequence S. And I have tags on these. Tags create submenus. So these are all the things that I tagged to show you today. I just realized I messed up when I started this screen share. I am going to stop it. We'll continue from where it's at, but I will make sure the audio is coming through properly this time. That was my mistake. You'd think I'd never done this before. Let's see. It is hard to pick out a window in mode part 2. That's it. All right. All right. So anyway, let's take a look at this first Bunch. Is the audio better now? Bunch is ideally
sounds about
what I made it for was launching sets of apps. Like that was the core purpose of Bunch, because I had like this set of apps that I wanted when I started work in the morning, and this set of apps I wanted when I was ready to chill out and listen to music, and this set of apps when I was working on a design project. And I had these contexts that focused around what apps were running, and I started writing it as an Apple script, and then I wanted it to just be better, so I made this. This is my Office Bunch. It launches OmniFocus, Calendar, Zoom, and then it opens up a section of another Bunch, and we'll get into that in a second. You'll notice this % symbol here. That means that when the Bunch closes, it'll quit any app that it opened that isn't already open in another Bunch. But if the % symbol is there, it won't quit that app when it closes. So that keeps Zoom running, just so I don't accidentally quit it in the middle of a Zoom call. And then There's a bunch of other syntaxes. If you put an underscore at the end of an app name, I should clarify, like, you just type the name of the app and that's going to launch the app, and it'll then quit it when it closes the bunch. It's that simple. In AppleScript, it would be tell application OmniFocus to activate. In Bunch, it's just OmniFocus. So the underscore at the end of the app name tells it to hide after launching. The % tells it to ignore it when quitting. A single exclamation point quits the app instead of launching it. A double exclamation point launches the app when quitting. It's a double negative. And then the @ symbol, it focuses the selected apps. So it's the equivalent of hitting Command Option and hides all other apps. Usually you would launch the app first and then focus it at the end to hide everything that you launched on the way. Oh, this front matter here, menu order, tells it where in the menu to place it. So you can have, normally it sorts them alphabetically, ignoring emoji, of course. But I have menus, I have menu orders set on some of these other ones that take them out of the alphanumeric sequence and let me more precisely position them in the menu. Helps for organization. All right, so this is the comms bunch that Office loads. This is set to open every, actually that's dumb. We don't need that. Oh, I don't have this set as startup. I'll show you why in a second. But you'll note these lines in here, which are dividers that create sections. When a bunch loads, these are ignored. They only matter when it's loaded as a snippet. To load a snippet, you use the left angle bracket, the name of the bunch, and then if you have a hash and then the name of a snippet, it'll load just that part of the bunch or the snippet that it's loading. So the Office bunch only loads these 3 apps. This is my login bunch. It had a startup. I have it set to start up on this machine and this machine only because it doesn't pertain to the other machines. Single bunch mode. In preferences, you can turn on single bunch mode, and what that means is that when you open one bunch, it automatically quits whatever bunch was currently open. So it's only ever has one bunch open at any given time. But you can put single bunch mode ignore into a bunch, and that means that when another bunch launches, this one stays running no matter what. Toggles false means, again, in preferences, you can have toggle bunches set to true. If this isn't true, you can never close a bunch, and a lot of features depend on being able to both open and close bunches, so I highly recommend having that set. That said, you can, on an individual bunch, turn on or set toggles to false, and then when it shows up in the menu, it won't have an indicator and you won't be able to close it. It can only open. All right, so this syntax right here, I'll get more specific about snippets in a second, but this syntax right here tells it to load a snippet from itself, which is anything that comes after 3 or more underscores at the bottom of the file. So it's going to look at the bottom of the file. It's going to find the comms section, the core section, and the other section. I do this mostly for organization. It doesn't serve a purpose in this particular bunch. Let's see, anything else interesting here? If you have just the name of a bunch with no hash or anything after it and no angle bracket before it, it will just straight up load that entire bunch for you. and it treats it as a child of the current bunch. So when you quit the login bunch, if it were quittable, it would also quit the comms bunch. So one of the things that was really nice when I was expanding bunches that I could access a lot of system settings that are nearly impossible to get to with AppleScript and take a lot of hacking to get through any kind of scripting. But because it was a native Mac app, I could access a lot of things like do not disturb, and you can turn do not disturb on just by in parentheses. All commands go inside of parentheses, and DND on turns do not disturb on. A lot of these commands automatically reverse. So if you turn DND on when you load a bunch, when you open a bunch, when you close the bunch, DND will toggle back off. You can control dark mode. You can change your wallpaper, hide your dock, set your audio output and input devices, set the volumes. You'll see this exclamation point here. That means to run that command when the bunch is closing. It gets a little confusing because the single exclamation point quits an app if it's followed by an app. But in the case of a command, it runs that command when it's closing. And the notify command posts a notification. And I'll show you. Let's do this. Let's give it a shortcut key. Command Option C. All right, so I will demo. I'll just run all of these commands and we'll see what happens. Got my dark mode, got my do not disturb, got my dock hidden. All good stuff. And then I can reverse it just by hitting the same key combination again. All right, so this is the companion to the one that I demoed at the beginning. This is when I'm ready to edit a podcast. I just hit my shortcut and then E, and it sets my audio devices to what I would want for editing. It asks me if I want to load Logic. This syntax right here, after a snippet, makes the snippet optional, and when it runs, it will ask you launch Logic, and if you cancel that, it won't load Logic. This snippet refers to this section, which just contains Logic Pro X. So basically we're making that app optional. Load up Descript, Auphonic Multitrack, and then Audio Hijack. We're going to send commands to Audio Hijack. First we close all windows, and then we hit Command 2, which opens up the recordings list for me. And then load up Forklift, and Forklift isn't scriptable, but you can save your tab sets and you can assign keyboard shortcuts to them. So what we're going to do here is open Forklift and send Option Control Shift P, which is just the keyboard shortcut that I assigned to my podcasting tab set. So if we run this, it'll ask us if we want to launch Logic. We're going to cancel that. It loaded up my podcasting set. I hit the keyboard shortcuts in Audio Hijack. Auphonic Multitrack is loaded. Everything's ready to go. And then when I'm done editing, I just run it again. And all of that stuff closes. All right. So, I have a similar bunch when I'm ready to screencast. On Shift S, these are outdated. I don't use them anymore. All right, so the and symbol runs automator workflows, and you can send variables to the automator workflow. So when you design it, you can have it accept variables. I'm not going to get into doing that, but it is built into Bunch, and this particular one loads up my timing. It starts a timing project and a task for me so I can track my time. The at symbol hides all windows. And then I'm going to hide my desktop. That means hide the icons on the desktop. Hide the dock and turn on Do Not Disturb while I'm screencasting. I open up ScreenFlow. I'm ignoring it on close because chances are I will want to continue editing in ScreenFlow after I finish podcasting or screencasting. And then this right now it's not doing much because I only have one project I am screencasting for. But this question mark curly bracket and then a menu title equals greater than sign and then a snippet. This creates a multi-choice menu, which is, stupid because there's only one choice in it. But what it does is whichever of these options you select when it runs, it will load the associated snippet. And in this case, it'll change my wallpaper to my marked desktop and open marked 2. And then it focuses ScreenFlow. I'm going to run this. We'll see what happens. Hopefully it won't break my current screen recording. So, normally there would be multiple choices here if that were a thing. All right, so we open marked. We changed our desktop wallpaper. And we got ScreenFlow running. So we can now finish our editing, and ScreenFlow stays running. And we're back where we started. I want to show you some different variable syntax you can use. Okay, so this is the array syntax. This lets you just put in menu items that don't have values. The variable podcast will be set to whichever of these two things you choose. The exact string will become the variable value. The $sign is how you run shell scripts. So in this case, we're running the Unix command date, and we're getting a formatted date that we can use as a note title later. We're asking without any other syntax, this question mark followed by double quotes just asks for text. So that'll be a free text entry. And then we use some logic, which is, it's advanced. You can do a lot of stuff with it, and you can nest logic, and it gets crazy. There's a bunch of conditions that you can test for, but in this case, if podcast, the variable we set up here, is overtired, then we're going to set explicit to true, and there's no guest. Otherwise, we assume it's systematic, so explicit is false, and this is a placeholder guest. I set a notebook variable, which is a path to my podcasting notebook for NV Ultra. I'm creating a note title with the podcast. Now I'm referencing the variable by using a $sign followed by curly brackets and then the name of the variable inside of it. The colon and everything after it serves as a default value. So if that variable isn't set, it'll fill it in with podcast notes. If podcast and episode don't exist. And then today is the date variable that we set, so it just adds a date stamp to the note. Front matter, this is using the HereDoc syntax, and a HereDoc in programming is a multi-line comment or a multi-line block of text. That's all it is, and it starts with usually like here, this is a better example over here, Doc. It starts with a signifier of some kind, and then it ends as soon as that signifier is used again, the exact same one. This is markdown syntax with the triple backticks. It works either way, and this kind of demonstrates both. But here's my text. Indentation doesn't matter. All of this will be outdented when the variable is used. So I'm setting, this is front matter. This is stuff that I want in my show notes as I'm podcasting. It includes the variables that we have set as part of the front matter, which is not to be confused with bunch front matter. This is front matter for my markdown post. And then we test again. If the podcast is systematic, it creates a new variable called note text, which imports this variable from above and then adds special notes about systematic, and the same for overtired. Then it generates a note URL, which is using NV Ultra's URL handler that puts in the notebook. And when I use the % instead of a $, that's going to URL encode it for me. So that's the notebook variable that we assigned way back here. And then it's going to use the URL handler to inject note text and add the title. And then it's going to open NV Ultra and run the URL in NV Ultra. Let's give it a shot. And here's our, that opened on another screen, sorry. But here's our note ready to go with all of our variables filled in and all of our boilerplate show notes ready to start taking notes. All right, so I was going to show you a couple more demos of what you can do with keystrokes, because keystrokes are something that are pretty hard to automate with AppleScript and shortcuts and other apps. Keyboard Maestro obviously is quite good at it, but Bunch excels at focusing an app and then sending keystrokes to it in a way that can't be interrupted by other things on the system. So what this is going to do is it's going to focus iTerm, hit Command N, Command D, which will open a new window and create a new pane. And then it's going to type, open a new pane. It's going to type a command and then hit return and then hit Command T to open a new tab. And then it's going to enter another command and hit return. The file line, the dash, followed by the curly brackets, indicates that you're sending shortcuts. However, and normally text would be sent with square brackets. But if you use double quotes inside of curly brackets, you can combine typing. This string would be typed out, and then outside of the curly brackets, this is actually sent as the return key in the Command T. So you can mix the two together. It makes life a lot easier, and it improves sending because it's all in one stream. And then we're also going to open messages, hit Command N for a new message. We're going to enter my email address, hit return twice. That's what the //n. There's a whole section in the documentation about the system key names that you can use and escape codes. These should be double slashes. My website keeps breaking. But //n sends return, T is tabs, S is space, like a force space, H is backspace, etc. This is all under the keystrokes documentation. All right, So we're going to create a new message, and we're going to type a message, and we're going to send it. You could do this, and you could even have a variable, like have it request input for like an email address, and then just spam the person. Let's be good. We'll be good. All right, so here we are in iTerm. We are a new window, new pane, send a command, send another command, and then messages. Not delivered. That's because it's to me. And you can see this was our command that we sent in the first pane. Open a new tab. Lots of possibilities there. You can even send an email. This is the series of keystrokes that would be required to send a new mail in MailMate. Done. Along the same lines, let's take a quick look at a question I got from one of your members, Frank. He wanted to be able to open the same search in every one of his browsers at once. Now, you can target, if you just want to open a URL, you can just put a URL right in your bunch. That will open that URL in whatever your default browser is. If you want to target specific browsers, you can just put a prefix before the URL, like Safari, Chrome, Brave, Firefox. So what I have this bunch doing is asking the question, what are you searching for? Which will open a dialog where we enter our search, and then it will use that variable to open a DuckDuckGo URL. You can put whatever search URL you want in there. You'll note that after the variable name, it has /URL. There are several transforms that you can perform on a variable. Let me grab that real quick. So you can use URL/shell, which will \escape and special characters, /raw, which will output the actual /n as new lines, meaning you can make like one string, and instead of having a new line, like a line break in it, you can type /n, and then when you transform it with /raw, it will output it with the line breaks. And /typed outputs it in a way that Bunch understands as a type string that you can use in a sending keystrokes. All right, so this URL escapes the query. It's similar to using %, but instead of % escaping, it uses plus signs where you would use a space, which there are some things that break if you use the %. So it's a fallback. And if we run this, we're going to search for Bunch Mac. You'll see all three of my browsers have launched that I listed. Two of them are off screen. Let me bring them over here. So I got Brave, Safari, and Chrome. I didn't set this to toggle because
there's no point when you launch a URL this way, instead of actually typing Safari and sending the URL, it won't close it when the bunch closes. Another thing Bunch can do is launch its own browser. There's a command called display. It's a way to create, if you give it a URL or an HTML file, it'll create what we call a single site browser, which is an app that just loads one web page. In this case, I have it loading up my home automation server in a floating window that I can quickly open and close just by using my keyboard shortcuts. I get this where I can go in and control my home. Then I just type the same keyboard shortcut again, and it disappears. So it's just a click away to get to all my stuff. The syntax for this is a little bit long. You can put these in any order, and all of the options can be abbreviated. Like this is actually Chrome none, which makes it not have buttons and extra toolbars and things. L, this is level, float, or floating, but you can just give it enough of it to figure out what you're talking about. And then this is the size of the window, and this is its position on the screen. I actually had it open on the other screen, but you can use display 0 to make sure it opens on your main display, or display 1 for the next display, etc. And obviously you can just do D1. All right, here's an interesting one. This uses the $sign to run a Unix command. And what this does is use the command hostname, which gets the name of my machine, like network name, modifies it into all caps, removes the .local from it, and then sends it to a tool called ImageMagick, which actually turns that text into an image and saves it in my home folder. And then this display command loads the image, and when you give an image to the display command, it creates a floating window of just that image, which we're going to make have no Chrome, no background, and like this right here means clear background, and we're going to put it on my screen, which gives you this. I use multiple machines, and I try to keep them very much kind of the same working environment. So sometimes if I've like switched to the display to my MacBook Pro, I won't realize which machine I'm on. So this gives me something on my desktop that always reminds me which machine I'm using. Oh, and this, because it stores the image in my home directory, I can have this run on every machine, just sync it with Dropbox, and it runs on every machine, and it runs at startup. This key in the front matter tells it as soon as bunch starts, run this. It ignores other bunches, and it doesn't toggle off. So it basically, as long as bunch is running, that identifier is showing, and the image in the home directory will be different depending on which machine it launched on. Okay. Another cool feature is with front matter, you can schedule a bunch. You would rarely use all of these keys at once, but so I think I mentioned the schedule if already. You can also use schedule unless and put in any UUID, or You can use any condition that you would use in logic. So you could say schedule if test var equals true. In fact, you can just do test var. You can do weekday and only have it schedule on certain days, etc. And then you have the various scheduling keys. Open on lets you say a day and a time. So you can say Friday noon or Tuesday 1 a.m. and you just kind of write out the date and time in natural language. You can also do series of days. So you could do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at 1 a.m. or Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You just have to use TH for Thursday. Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 1 a.m., comma, Tuesday, Thursday at, we'll say 6:30 a.m. So you can combine different schedules together. Open at opens it every day at a specific time. So every day at 11:45 a.m. this would open. You can also do close at, and then you can do open every and like give it like 1 hour, 30 minutes or 2 hours or 30 seconds, which would be ridiculous. And you can also close every, and you can do open every and then close after and have it automatically close itself after it's run. If you're into shell scripting, whether it's in Bash or Ruby or whatever, you can use the $ to load up external scripts. You can use the exclamation point to run scripts when a bunch is closing. When you run a script, you can send both command line arguments to it, or you can set environment variables, and then in your script you have access to all of the command line arguments and to the environment variables. So you can have the same bunch use or multiple bunches use the same script and send different variables to it depending on the bunch. You can also use any variable that you set in the bunch. So if I just had foo bar up here, you can set arbitrary variables in the front matter, and then $foo would be available. And variables in front matter, there's a whole bunch of ways you can set front matter using scripts and external files, but we won't get into that. That's super advanced stuff. All right, the last thing I'll mention is that Bunch can integrate with just about any other automation app, from Better Touch Tool to Hammerspoon, Hazel, Launchbar, and Alfred. I've documented just a fraction of what all it could potentially integrate with, but any app that has a URL handler or an AppleScript library or an Automator library, you can incorporate into a Bunch. Like I use Moom. Bunch doesn't do window management, like it can't position other apps' windows, but Moom makes it possible to organize all your windows the way you want them, save it as a snapshot, and then in the Bunch that launches all those apps, you just use a single AppleScript call to trigger that snapshot, and it'll position all the windows, and then you can use ~10, which puts a 10-second delay on that script to give all the apps time to load. You can also use waiting snippets, but we didn't get into that. There's a lot that even in an hour I didn't have time to get into, but this documentation site is very complete. It has a very accurate search bar, so you can look up the feature that you need when you need it. You can grab the syntax. You don't have to memorize everything. syntax you use often. It's simple enough that you'll be able to whip out a bunch to do whatever you need. But if you need to remember how to do something that you don't do often, there is a syntax reference that gives you just quick examples of different formats, all of the front matter keys that are available, and how to use the URL handler to integrate Bunch with other applications. So yeah, I will stop there, and we'll go back to questions. Hopefully I didn't leave you dumbfounded or bored, and I can answer some curiosities.
All right, definitely not bored. I see a lot of potential for how I might use Bunch, but I can understand this is your wheelhouse, it's not mine. So for someone who's just starting out, who sees the benefits of using Bunch, but who's just not coding or technical syntax totally literate, where do you recommend I start?
Do you mean to learn?
Yes.
The bunchapp.co website has a docs documentation section where I have every time I've added a feature to Bunch, I've written about it. So literally everything Bunch can do is documented there. All of the syntax is covered. There's syntax summaries so you can get started quickly. And then there's a page of example bunches. I think it's either sample bunches or example bunches in the menu. And that shows a lot of a simplified version, but a lot of the stuff that I talked about today that you can use as reference.
Okay.
So you find something similar to what you want to accomplish, and it should get you started.
Okay, wonderful. All right. Anyone else have a question for Brett? Go ahead. Someone unmuted themselves. Do you have it? Okay, I guess you don't have a question. All right.
Do.
Go ahead, Melissa.
Thank you. Remind me again of the syntax editing application that you recommended.
Well, I was working in Sublime Text. The three that have Bunch packages are Sublime Text, TextMate, and VS Code. All three of those are basically programmers editors, and if you don't need them for anything else, they're not worth getting. They're generally, well, VS Code is free, but the other two are like $70, and they're big complex beasts that you don't need if you're not doing anything else with them. So if that's the case, you can totally edit these just in TextEdit.
Wonderful. And I love TextEdit.
The only thing you have to be aware of in TextEdit is that it has a rich text mode and a plain text mode. And to edit a bunch, you have to be in plain text mode, which is Command-Shift-T to switch between the modes.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Wonderful. All right. Any other questions for Brett? Paul Griffith, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, hi Brett. Very interesting presentation. Quite a lot to get your head around. I'm the sort of person who learns best by sort of working through examples. Where exactly on your website are the example or sample bunches? I had a look through the contents, but I can't find them.
Yeah, it's I will drop a link into the chat right now.
That would be brilliant. Thank you very much.
It's under using bunch. No, I'm sorry. It's under bunch files and then sample bunches. Here comes the link.
Great. Thank you.
Yep, found it now. Thank you.
All right. All right. It is 12:45. Brett, I want to thank you very much for this great information. And I will be contacting you.
Awesome.
All right,
Yeah,
George,
and
all yours.
seriously,
Yeah,
anyone who wants help setting up their first bunch, you'll have my email address.
wonderful. Thank you again. All right, George, all yours.